Morning guys, this video is filmed the morning after the night before, the day after Hughie Fury versus Joseph Parker. To everyone who saw my post-fight video last night, I was in a state of stunned, I was not believing what I was seeing. So, whenever that's the case in boxing, I sleep on it, take a day, then I have another look. So I'm recording this video, and it's going to be a longer video, to discuss Joseph Parker versus Hughie Fury. Now, my initial video has got a good number of views. It has 700 comments on it already, and that's about 12 hours after it's been uploaded. So a lot of the common themes in those comments I'm going to address in this video. I don't have enough hours in the day to respond to 700 comments individually, so when I'm seeing 50 people with the same comment, it's easier for me to make a video to address the comments. So we'll get to addressing the comments in the second part of the video. Before we do that, there's a lot of discussion points to get to. So let me begin by saying, sometimes when you, and I've made notes for this video, very, very rare that I make any notes for my videos. Usually I just shoot from the hip. But I think there's so much we need to cover in this video that I have made a few notes. So if you see me looking down, that's probably why. I'm just making sure I get everything in and don't forget to include everything. Sometimes you watch a fight and you know it's going to be a controversial fight. When I watched Golovkin-Canelo last week, whoever I thought was winning that fight, and I scored it a draw initially and then on second viewing scored it to Golovkin. But when I watched that fight, I could tell it was going to be a controversial fight. Canelo was having success in a certain manner. Golovkin was having success in a certain manner. I could tell it was going to come down to what he liked. I could tell different people were going to have different views. Honestly, when I watched Hughie Fury versus Joseph Parker last night, I didn't get the same impression. I didn't think this was going to be a controversial fight whatsoever. I thought this was a clear victory for Hughie Fury. Last night in my post-fight video, I scored the fight 8 rounds to 4 in favour of Hughie Fury. Having reflected on it, I don't think my initial scorecard was a bad scorecard. That's my opinion. If you scored it 7 rounds to 5 in favour of Hughie Fury, if you gave Parker an additional round to what I did, I also have no problem with that scorecard. Did I see it as a draw? Absolutely not. Did I see it as Parker winning? Absolutely not. That's my opinion. I've never been someone, at least I never intend to be someone who dismisses other people's opinions. And what I will say is there are a number of people I have spoken to about this fight who see it the other side as me. And there are a number of people who see Parker winning this fight whose opinions I actually respect and who I've got a lot of time for and who know boxing every bit as well as me, and in certain cases I'm sure a hell of a lot better than me. So despite the fact that I saw this as a fairly simple fight to score, and despite the fact that I saw this as a clear victory to Hughie Fury, I acknowledge that there is substantial debate as to who won this fight, and I acknowledge that there is substantial disagreement as to what exactly went on in the ring. And at no point in this video will I look to put down the opinions of those who scored it to Joseph Parker, but I will respectfully disagree. I think on my post-fight video the comments are split, probably fairly 50-50. A huge amount of people do think Hughie won the fight, like myself. I've spoken to at least 10, probably more like 20 New Zealand boxing fans who agree with me that Parker won the fight. This isn't a New Zealand versus UK issue. There are people in England who believe Parker won the fight. There are people in New Zealand who believed Hughie Fury won the fight. I, as I say, had it 8 rounds to 4. I could see 7 rounds to 5, but a definite win for Hughie Fury. And I understand from the post-fight interviews that have gone up on IFL TV that Mick Hennessy and the Furies will be instructing their lawyers and will be appealing against the result to get that overturned. I heard Mick Hennessy discussing corruption at the highest level in boxing. Now, that's not to say that I think necessarily they're going to have success with that appeal. That's not necessarily to say that I believe there is corruption at any level, let alone at the highest level in boxing. But what I would say is there is at least substantial debate here. Obviously, the Furies have a particular point of view, and they are going to be appealing. So we'll see what comes of that, although I would suspect that the result will stand at this point. With regards to the judging, I don't think we should let the 118s, 110s necessarily sway what happened in the fight. I think we can have a sensible argument as to who won the fight, and you can maybe say Hughie, you can maybe say Joseph, and then I think we can put that to one side and say, regardless of who we think won the fight, let's talk about the scoring. The scoring of 118, 110, I think is terrible. I think the fact that you can look at that fight and give Joseph Parker 10 rounds, I personally think is terrible, and I can't see how they've come to that conclusion. Now, a lot of perfectly sensible Joseph Parker fans have it a draw, have Joseph Parker winning, but I don't believe even the hardcore Joseph Parker fans commonly have Joseph Parker winning 10 of the 12 rounds. I just don't believe it was that kind of fight where Joseph Parker was able to land enough shots on Hughie Fury to win 10 rounds. You know, I just cannot see it. I do think that there were certain other factors at play which influenced those judges' scorecards. I'm going to start by referring to the Canelo-Golovkin fight, which I've already mentioned in this video. You know, the judges on this fight will be aware of the controversy surrounding that fight, which took place only last week. They will be aware that the public consensus was that the come-forward aggressor, Gennady Golovkin, deserved to win the fight. And they will be aware of the absolute scandal that occurred with Adelaide Bird's scorecard and how her name has been dragged through the mud at every level in boxing. Now, whether it's conscious or subconscious, those judges who sat down to judge Hughie Fury, Joseph Parker last night will not have wanted to have ended up in an Adelaide Bird situation. They will not want to be in a position where their name is being dragged through the mud like Adelaide Bird. So when they've seen Joseph Parker, who I would admit was the front forward fighter for the vast majority of this fight, perhaps subliminally, they've been aware of what the public reaction was to the scoring in Golovkin-Canelo, and perhaps they thought, well, the consensus was that Golovkin deserved to win that fight because he's the front foot fighter. Here it is again with Joseph Parker. I also believe, and I actually give David Higgins credit here, that David Higgins did a fantastic job in the week leading up to this fight in terms of creating awareness of the judging, awareness of the refereeing, and you know, Terry O'Connor's name, and he was one of the judges, by the way, who scored it 118 to 110 with Parker, was all over the boxing press. Higgins had created a big issue about O'Connell's involvement in the fight, and you know, perhaps Terry O'Connell was sitting there thinking, you know, wow, this is a close fight, this is a controversial fight. He a lot of pressure. I'm not saying that's necessarily consciously made him change the way he's seen a fight or change the way he scored the fight, but there will have been a huge amount of pressure going on to him in this fight due to the dissatisfaction that's already been expressed about his name by the Parker camp. So I don't know if subliminally that's had an effect. I've never been one of these boxing fans to scream corruption from the rooftops. Fundamentally, Hughie Fury is a Manchester fighter. The fight was in Manchester. The fight was promoted by his promoter. We had a British referee. We had one judge out of 3 as a British judge. You know, for me, this is hardly like he's gone to New Zealand and been robbed. This is on his home territory. You know, I'm not sure about this corruption argument. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. But I will say there is a potential that Canelo-Golovkin fight and the dissatisfaction that followed, combined with the hype and awareness that David Higgins created around Terry O'Connell's position, you know, perhaps that has had a subliminal effect. I don't know. And you know, I don't give any negative criticism to David Higgins there. David Higgins works with Joseph Parker. He's done a good job of protecting his man's interests. So don't misconstrue what I'm saying as criticism of David Higgins. He's done a good thing for his camp and for his man. But I wonder if that has played in the part and put a tremendous amount of pressure and visibility on the judges. And it's meant that they've been more inclined to favour a front foot fighter. Because even if you guys believe Parker won the fight, I think it's going to be a minority who believe Parker won the fight, won 10 of those rounds. Yeah, my take, for what it's worth, one of the reasons I was so surprised in yesterday's video was this fight broke down pretty much exactly as I expected to. what happened in the ring was exactly what I thought would happen. The scorecards weren't what I thought it would be. The decision wasn't what I thought it would be. But I expected Hughie Fury to turn up, do exactly what he did. I expected Parker to turn up and to do exactly what he did. But I just thought that would be enough for Hughie Fury to get the win. I went and I did an interview with Trackside Radio in New Zealand on Friday night with my good friend Mark Stafford. And I said to Mark, I expect the early parts of this fight to be a battle of the jabs. I expect Hughie to outmaneuver and outjab Joseph Parker. As we get towards the middle rounds, I expect Joseph Parker to stop trying to outjab Hughie Fury and to try and walk him down and try and close down the reins. I suspect that Hughie will make Joseph Parker miss and start to counter him. That's exactly what I said, and that's exactly what I saw happening in the fight last night. Maybe I've, as I said, clearly I've seen this very, very differently to the judges. But the way I see it is that Hughie Fury was the general in there. Hughie Fury controlled the pace in there. I thought Hughie Fury made Parker miss with great regularity. I thought Hughie timed and countered Parker very, very nicely. And I thought Parker landed very little of substance. There were a few flurries. There were spots where you could give Parker rounds. As I say, I gave Parker multiple rounds. I'm not saying that Hughie whitewashed Parker by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get it twisted. But for me, Parker was just not landing anything like enough shots on Hughie Fury to win the majority of the rounds, let alone 10 of the 12. So that's my take on it. Let's talk about the future for both guys. Let's start with Joseph Parker. I've always liked Joseph Parker. I've always been a fan of Joseph Parker. I was sitting on this channel making videos 3-4 years ago talking about Joseph Parker as a future world champion. Some of the Kiwi fans who've come to my channel in the past week may not appreciate that. Some of the Kiwi fans who've been tuning in for the past few years may have some sympathy with what I'm saying here. I really like Joseph Parker as a fighter. He's got fast hands, he's athletic, he comes to fight, he's exciting to watch, he's got power, he's not afraid of a proper scrap. I like Joseph Parker. He's got a lot of pros, he's got a good chin, he's got a good will to win, etc. Where will he go from here? I think Parker's proved himself as a world level fighter. His resume for a guy at 25 is increasingly strong. He's now got wins over Carlos Takam, Andy Ruiz and Hughie Fury. You could make a strong and tangible case that that's a stronger heavyweight resume than the vast majority of operators. You could make a very strong case that Joseph Parker deserves to be considered a top 5 heavyweight. There's an argument that Joseph Parker has better wins than Deontay Wilder. There's an argument that Joseph Parker has better wins than Luis Ortiz. He certainly deserves to be in that conversation. I think he's got better wins than Kubrat Pulev, etc. Joshua does have the win over Klitschko, which represents a level of elite form. But Parker deserves to be in that conversation of the top 5 at heavyweights. People asking me, will he rematch Hughie Fury? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Parker, I expect, will look to stay in the UK market. I expect he'll look to make fights with the likes of a Joshua, or if not a Joshua, perhaps the likes of a Bellew or a Dillian White, which would be big money fights over here. I don't necessarily see why he rematches Hughie Fury. I think it's a tough fight for him. Obviously, I do think that, given that I thought Hughie Fury won the fight. And I don't see it as a fight that he necessarily gains a lot out of. From a business perspective, Parker should look for the bigger money fights, the fights that are going to sell out bigger arenas, the fights that are going to sell more pay-per-views. And, potentially that's doing some business with Lee Hearn now. Hearn's got Bellew, Hearn's got White, Hearn's got Joshua. Hearn's got a working relationship with David Haye. Potentially that is the angle he should go down, especially after this fight with his profile increased in the UK. I see Parker as a world level fighter. At this stage, I don't see Parker as an elite fighter, being frankly. I've talked about some deficiencies in Parker's game now for several years. There are some improvements, but they're not improved enough in my humble opinion. I think that he is a fighter who very much is at his best when he's able to dictate the pace of a fight from range. When an opponent's moving away from him, when an opponent's coming in on him, I don't think he's as comfortable. I think he's a guy who needs to be given space, time, room to manoeuvre, space, time and distance to get those crisp, clean combinations off. I think defensively, Parker's open. I think he's quite easy to counter, and I still don't think he's using the best of his attributes, specifically his jab. My personal belief was he got totally out-jabbed last night. Although my personal belief was anti what the judges said. So, you know, respect to Joseph Parker. He did a lot in there that deserves credit. He was the come-forward fighter. He was the one looking to make the fight. You know, he fought for 12 rounds. He was coming on strong. He took everything Hughie Fury had and kept putting punches together. I rate Joseph Parker very, very highly, don't get me wrong. But the fact I rate him so highly doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to score rounds to him. As for Hughie Fury, I think this is a very hard loss for Hughie Fury to take. Hughie Fury is not a glamorous name in the heavyweight division. He's not a big ticket seller. He's not a big pay-per-view star. This is not like if Anthony Joshua lost the fight. You know, if Anthony Joshua lost the fight, he could still come back, sell out 20,000 seats and be a pay-per-view star. Hughie Fury, it's not like that. He's with a promoter who doesn't put on a huge amount of shows. He's not got a promoter who can slip him in a few undercards and, you know, just try and get him a few 8-rounders. Maybe they can work with Frank Warren to do that. Maybe Frank Warren can be part of this rebuilding process. I don't know. But this is a hard loss for Hughie to take. It's not like he's going to walk straight back into a headline event. You know, his style doesn't impress the majority of fans. Last night he received a huge amount of criticism for being boring and negative. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's the fact of the matter. He's not a huge commercial entity, and I think it's going to be hard for him to come back and hard for him to get another shot. I also think he's a very tricky guy to fight. You know, I don't think people are looking at Hughie Fury and thinking he's an easy fight, even though the scorecards were as they were. I don't think Deontay Wilder or Anthony Joshua is going to be looking at Hughie and thinking, he's easy work. Let's bring him in for a voluntary. You know, I don't think he brings the name, and I don't think he brings the style that makes him likely to get that voluntary. So I think he's going to have to work his way back to mandatory. Perhaps he can, you know, pick up a British title. Perhaps he can pick up a European title, a Commonwealth title, and rebuild that way. I don't know, but I do think it's a hard loss for him. I do think it's hard for him to come back from. If we're being critical of Hughie Fury for 1 second, he could have done more last night. I felt he did enough, but he definitely could have done more. I felt like he went into sparring partner mode a bit. I felt he started to coast a bit. I believe they thought they were well ahead in the fight, and I think he really let Parker rally and come back into the fight strong, especially in the last 3 or 4 rounds. I don't think Hughie sat down on his punches enough. You know, I thought he set off a very good lead by dancing around the ring, but I think at some point he should have looked to have sat down on his punches a bit more. I think he's a very good body puncher who didn't use his body punching as well as he should have done. I think he's got a decent cross that he didn't employ with as much regularity as he should have done. So, you know, there you go. There you go. There is some criticism for Hughie Fury here. I don't see it as all a bed of roses. I think Hughie Fury does perhaps need to work on being a bit more aggressive. He does perhaps need to work on not just being all style and having a bit more substance. And I do think he's going to learn from this, that in this day and age in boxing, it is harder to be a back foot fighter and to get the credit you deserve from it. So perhaps that's an adjustment they need to make. But I think it's going to be very hard for him to rebuild. I think this is one of the benefits with being with like an Eddie Hearn right now, is Hearn's got so many shows, so many opportunities to slip you in an 8-rounder and rebuild you and try and get you a little title and try and get you some TV time. It's going to be hard for Hughie. Hughie needs huge activity now. He's only 23. He's been inactive prior to this fight. Let's see how he comes back. Let's see what job Hennessy does with him. I don't think it's the worst thing if Hennessy and Hughie partner with Frank Warren and try and get him out a bit more. Right, so that's my take on the fight. That's my take on the two fighters. For me, two, you know, real top level talents. Both guys do certain things very, very well. Both guys have room for improvements in certain areas. You know, people talking about them fighting Anthony Joshua. I don't think Hughie Fury is going to be fighting Anthony Joshua anytime soon after that loss. You know, I think he is on a long rebuild process. As for Parker, I still wouldn't rush Parker. He's only 25. He's still learning. He's still improving. If a fight with a Bellew or a Dillian White came up, or even a David Price or a Derek Chisora, I'd get all over those fights. Those are fights I'd make him a favourite in. Those are fights where he could use his boxing pedigree a bit more rather than just trying to rush in on an opponent. And those will continue to build his name in the UK market. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I stand by my initial scoring. I stand by my initial surprise. But I would say Hughie could have done more, and in hindsight, Hughie should have done more. Let me address some of the comments. Let me move on and address some of the comments that I received yesterday. And what I would say is I've removed a number of the comments from the initial video. I haven't removed any comments purely because they disagree with me. I've left all comments that disagree with me that represent sensible, logical argument. What I have removed is the comments that are purely abusive. Not necessarily because I don't let these things upset me, but I think a number of the comments were very offensive and could potentially have caused offence to people visiting my channel. Some of the language used by a range of fans to describe the Furies was particularly unpleasant, and I think people need to be very sensible about what they write online, because you know, if you make comments like that on an internet platform, you know, those comments can remain visible, and it's you know, it's not me personally who's going to be offended, but I think you should, you know, not say something online unless you're prepared to say it in a court of law sometimes. And you know, some of the comments about the Furies in particular were very unpleasant. So I've removed any comments that were just purely you know, purely outrageous, purely abusive, and I've left all the sensible comments. Let's talk about some of those sensible comments, or semi-sensible comments. A number of the arguments I've had, all Hughie Fury did was run. You can't win a fight that way. Hughie Fury did not do enough to rip the belts away from the champion. After the fight, Parker wasn't marked up at all. He didn't have a black eye or any bruises or cuts on his face. Hughie Fury was too boring to win the world title. Now, if you're one of the people who made one of those comments, and by the way, it wasn't one person who made those comments, probably got 50 people making those comments. Let me ask you, whatever happened to the sweet science? Whatever happened to hit and not get hit? This is not a pub fight. You know, this is not a brawl on the street. This isn't two guys coming to fight. It's two guys practicing the art of boxing. It's two guys matching their skills of hitting and not being hit. Boxing is scored in a specific fashion. Whether you like it or whether you don't, boxing is scored on a 10-point must system. At the end of each round, you score 10 points to the fighter you thought won that round. Clean work needs to be the key determining factor in who you give that round to. If Hughie Fury is looking to run, if Hughie Fury isn't marking up Joseph Parker, if Hughie Fury is boring, all of that is a borderline irrelevance in my mind as to how you score it around. If Hughie Fury's landed multiple punches on Parker, and Parker has failed to land multiple punches on Fury, that should be a Hughie Fury round. You know, all of this thing about ripping the belts away, that's not how it works. If you win the majority of rounds, you win the fight. There's none of this. He won 7 of the 12 rounds, but did he rip the belt away? If he won 7 of the 12 rounds, he won the fight. You know, if you pick the national lottery numbers next week and they come in, you've hit the criteria for winning the lottery. You haven't ripped the money away from the lottery. This is if you turn up to work and do your 9 to 5 and do what you're supposed to do, you get paid for it. You know, it's none of this, did you go over and beyond, or you don't get your salary. People have been sending me messages saying it's good I've scored the fight to Hughie Fury, but I think it's good for boxing that Joseph Parker won. I totally disagree. And I like Joseph Parker. But I think it's terrible for boxing that people actually believe that Hughie Fury won 7 of the 12 rounds, but didn't deserve to win the fight because he was boring, because he was negative, because he was on his back foot. This is what's giving boxing a bad name. You know, if we're in a day and age where even the boxing fans are saying, okay, he won 4 or 5 rounds, but he was the one who had the more exciting style, you know, for me, this is giving boxing a very, very bad name. It's the complete opposite of being good for boxing. I got lots of comments personally, and I won't shy away from them. I got lots of comments personally saying that I was exhibiting a huge bias because I am UK based. I totally refute that. I think it's a huge weakness, actually. I think it's a very, very weak argument when you come on the channel and you don't tell me how your man won the fight. You don't disagree with any of my points. You don't make your own arguments. But what you instead say is, oh, you're from the UK. You're biased. Boxing is a subjective sport. People having a right to have an opinion on a fight. Our opinions can disagree. If our opinions disagree, I won't try and bully you into my opinion. I'm going to make a video expressing my opinion, but you're entitled to disagree with me. That doesn't mean you're biased. That doesn't mean you know nothing about boxing. It means we disagree on a subjective thing. It's so weird how people throw that bias word out there straight away. You know, I had one person tweet me today saying they'd lost all respect for me. Fine. If you can lose all respect for someone because they've scored a controversial boxing match different to you, then, you know, that possibly says more about you. You know, all of these comments about bias and stuff. I'm a Parker fan. I've been one of Parker's biggest advocates, you know, historically on YouTube. You know, I've been covering Parker 2 or 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. I've had Parker's promoters get in touch with me, and off the back of my videos, you know, like I am not someone who is a Joseph Parker hater or a New Zealand hater. I like to see Joseph Parker doing well. I think he's a very good fighter to watch. But my opinion is my opinion, and my opinion is that he lost a fight last night. And I'm not going to be bullied into telling you that I think Joseph Parker won the fight, because that's the public consensus. I didn't start a YouTube channel so I could come on here and report on the fight like a newsreader. I didn't start a YouTube channel to come in and say, Joseph Parker won the fight, the scorecards were XYZ, the CompuBox stats were 1, 2, 3. Have a good evening. No, I came here to have some sensible discussion and opinion, and in all my videos I try and put my opinions across, and if my opinions are different to yours, then let's just call it as simple as that. You know, let's just say it's 2 adults disagreeing about a subjective topic, I guess. So there we go. That's my thoughts on this fight, all in all. I think the Furies do have a right to feel hard done by. Whoever you think won the fight, I do think the scorecards were ludicrous. I think there's improvement for both guys. I think they can both learn from this experience and improve for this experience. And and I suspect they'll both be better fighters, having gone 12 rounds against each other last night. I think they're both top operators within the heavyweight division. I think Parker in particular will go on to be involved in some very, very big fights in the next 9 to 12 months. Hughie Fury's got to rebuild, but he's got plenty of time. He's 23 years old. He can come again. He's just got to be kept busy. He's got to be given a bit of activity and a bit of momentum, and he's got to maybe have some more learning fights, because you know, Hughie Fury hasn't really fought many people in that sort of top 30 bracket. He's fought a range of guys on the periphery of the top 50, and then nothing in between them and Joseph Parker. Maybe this is the time for Hughie to go back and have some of those fights. Maybe Hughie could benefit from some of the type of fights that Joe Parker's actually had, the Tacats, the Ruizes. Maybe those are good fights for Hughie Fury at this stage. Let me know your thoughts, guys. If you still disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. Maybe it's one of the good things about boxing that you know, this sort of stuff creates so much discussion. I think Hughie won the fight. I didn't think it was a very good fight. I thought both guys had areas of their performance that could merit improvement, and I didn't think the styles gelled. But fair play, and credit does go to Parker. You've come here to the UK, you've gone away from home, you've fought on a rival promoter's show, you've pushed the pace, you have tried to make the fight, and you've done enough to get the decision. Let me know your thoughts, drop your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so before, do subscribe. Many thanks as always for tuning in.